Learn to code, build apps, inspire the next generation.
Welcome to the Swift App School podcast, where we are empowering the next generation of app developers.
I'm Charles Long, co-founder of Swift App School.
And I'm Bob Williams, co-founder of Swift App School.
So, Bob, this is our first episode. Let's start out with some introductions. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. I'll start with I graduated from the University of Georgia back in 97 with a journalism degree. So yes, I am old. And I worked in communications for about 17 years and worked with Charles for those 17 years. And specialized in graphic design, journalism, and then learned coding along the way. We started an app development camp in 2015. And we've been attending Apple's WWDC since 2010. I like to play the guitar. I like to write songs. And I've got a wife and 2 kids. That's about it for me.
Great. I'm Charles Long, and I'm a native of Asheville, North Carolina. I eat, sleep, and breathe technology, and I have an extensive IT background, which started at a very young age. And it started with just tinkering with different hardware and the typical IT story that you hear, where I was tearing computers apart, putting them back together back in the 90s. Spent a lot of my teenage years working at IT firms, doing computer repairs, running Ethernet cabling and fiber optics, coding websites. My major focus was computer science and game design in college. So my knowledge of programming covers about 15 languages. And I guess the most inspirational moment in my life was when my high school math teacher, Richard Gabriel, left IBM to become a teacher. And he said something that changed my life, which was he felt like he wasn't giving back working in a day-to-day job where he's writing code. And so he decided to basically teach math. And after school, me and a few other people went to him and said, "Hey, can you teach us C++ programming?" And we fast forward to now, and now I'm returning the favor. I've been working in IT for over 20 years in the education sector, and worked with Bob since 2003, I guess it was.
Yeah, 2003.
And up till 2019, 2020. So yeah, 17 years we worked together. I enjoy basketball and video games, and I have a wife and 4 daughters. So that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, and you have 4 daughters aging quite a wide range of ages.
Yeah, we cover the entire spectrum from 4 to 18.
Yeah, my kids are going on 13, and my son just turned 17. So yeah. So we can talk about App Camp. So this summer we had our first App Camp in quite a while that was in person. And the year before, we had to do the App Camp fully remotely because of COVID. So that remote year was a big learning experience for us because we had never taught an App Camp remotely before. We had kids on Chromebooks, and they were running Xcode, and that was pretty amazing that actually worked because we weren't sure how well it was going to work. Some of our students were from the Young Eisner Scholars organization. They were from LA, they were from New York, Chicago, Boone, North Carolina, and Asheville. So it was really nice to see that wide spectrum from different areas of the country. And I think they continue to have a Discord following to this day. So it's kind of nice that they still have their community where they are able to continue to talk about coding and Roblox and whatever else they talk about. So it's kind of nice. I think that's what we like, is that we can kind of build this community and continue to help out and be a resource for the students as they continue their learning. So that's what we want to be all about. And eventually maybe we'll become a full-time organization, but right now we're doing this in our spare time and because we believe in it. So
Yeah, and I'll add one thing if people are listening and wondering how do you do app development on a Chromebook? One of the things that allowed this to happen was platforms such as Mac and Cloud and Mac Stadium that have virtual Macs. And having one screen with Zoom open, another screen with the virtual machine was very challenging, but we made it through it. And like everyone else in the world, I feel like we did the best that we could do during a pandemic where everybody's locked
Yeah.
down. I think they really enjoyed it, but we were really happy to be back in person this year.
Yeah, definitely. And we can also mention just a shout out to Jack Hamilton, who really helped us that first year and this past year with our virtual camps. So it was really nice to have another experienced programmer, as someone who's actually working in this Swift programming language on a day-to-day basis now that he has a career in that. So it's been great having him helping us along the way and kind of giving back as well, because I think he believes in the same things we believe in as far as giving back to students and especially underserved students.
And also, Brinkley Sprunt, I guess he worked at Oracle for how long? Is he retired now?
Yeah, he recently retired. I think he was been at Oracle for probably at least 10 years.
So he helped us as a keynote speaker this year on our second
Yeah,
week. And you want to talk about the keynote speaker from the first week?
yeah. We also had David Sherline at raywenderlich.com, and he was able to kind of talk about um, just technology in general and coding and kind of the history of computer science. And I thought that was a really interesting talk that he had. And hopefully, we've got the video. We just need to upload it to YouTube. But I'd like to upload that one and upload Brinkley's as well, so that we could put that on our channel and you guys could watch it, because I think both of those talks were really nice and inspiring. One other thing I guess we could talk about is this past summer we had 19 students attend our in-person app camp, and that was amazing because we had so much support thanks to Hatch. They are a nonprofit group here in Asheville, kind of an incubator supporting organizations like ourselves, and they were able to really help us get started faster than we thought we could have. And so it was great because we had the laptops ordered, we had some iPads that barely came in time, but they came in thanks to Charles's efforts, and we were actually able to do AR and use the reality kit.
I mean, it was just amazing to come back in person because a lot of our activities are really difficult to do remote. And what we do at the app camp is get the students involved. We bring them up to the front of the classroom and we have various activities that they can do to interact with each other. So that kind of breaks the ice and allows them to get up from the seat, not spend the entire day just sitting in front of a keyboard. When we built this camp, we weren't just putting kids in front of a computer and they're just buried in the screens the entire time. The activities that we do to solidify the complex or abstract patterns that you need to learn, I think it is really complicated for kids unless they reach sort of like the algebra 2 level to actually get a grasp of how your mind needs to work in order to comprehend it. So what we do is we bring kids up and we refer to cars and cakes and houses, and we use these concrete examples where we can actually break down those concepts and those barriers. And then they go, oh, okay, light bulbs are clicking at that point, and then they can actually learn with something tangible. I think that's the key, is that if you're just spitting out terms like, polymorphism and inheritance, then they don't get it. And so we try to make use of real world examples that they can use to actually understand these concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. We created an app called Swift Flags, where it's kind of like a theme park app that you would get. Let's say if you're going to a theme park, you usually have an app that you download that has your location, and it has information about how to purchase food and things like that. So we actually had a little app that would calculate what you purchase and make a pretend purchase. Basically, we didn't have it tied to any database or anything like that, but at least it was visual. It kind of showed the students how you would create, your first mock-up of an app. I think that was really nice, to show them something that interacted, something that had a little like photo gallery in it, and they could click on the photos and scroll through and just start to learn how SwiftUI really works. Because we've been teaching UIKit for so long, we're actually teaching ourselves SwiftUI as we're teaching the students. So it's kind of nice because we're learning some things that we didn't realize as we go. Obviously, I'm leaning on giants like Paul Hudson and Sean Allen and people like that who have the resources out there for professionals, but and Ray Wenderlich. So we're constantly teaching ourselves, constantly learning, and that's what it's all about. I mean, I never want to be to a point in my career where I'm not learning something new, and that's why I think that's a big part of why we do this, is because it allows us to keep learning. And they always say teaching is your best tool for learning. So if you want to learn iOS development, maybe go teach it. That's the best way to learn.
I agree with that. And one of the things I really liked was seeing Jack Hamilton teach these students how to create a 2D sprite kit game at the end of the week, rounding off all the things we've discussed already, and to see the progression the students made in that week and that they're able to comprehend a fairly complex project. It's pretty amazing. And at the end, the real feedback comes from the students and the parents when they're excited and saying, hey, what's next? I think that's what's driving us to continue the mission. What is next? And offering Swift App School online curriculum seems to be the next logical step. And then communicating with different schools or organizations that are interested in pushing computer science.
Absolutely. I just think there's not, we've read the articles that are out there, and actually there was one recently on code.org that talked about computer science being taught in high schools and how 51% of high schools are now teaching it, something like that.
Yeah, so there's this article, we can post the link in the notes, but going back to 2018, I think we could go further back because we've been teaching our camps and involved with students well before that time. So we can see when the number is a lot lower, but based on this chart, they're showing in 2018, 35% of the schools were teaching computer science. And looking at 2019, in 1 year, that jumped to 45%. And I think that's because there's been a lot of focus from the top, from a government level, even. In the United States, we're so far behind. And when you talk about other countries and how advanced they are in terms of computer science, mathematics, STEM related topics, then you can see that, America has been behind for quite a while. And I think that their eyes are being opened to that. And so there's a lot more focus on it. And so you're seeing, from 2018 to 2019, 10% more, going to 45% of the high schools in the country teaching computer science. Now, we know what happened in 2020 because the number jumps from 45% to only 47%. That's, 2 more percent, but we know what happened. And from 2020 to 2021, it's 51%. And I think that, now there's been a couple of different opinions based on your viewpoint here, whether or not we're slowing down, or are we now back into normal and then we're going to see an increase of 10% over the next year. We don't know, but we obviously want to do our part to help that number. But this article points out that there's a lot of disparities still. One of the things that's dear to our heart is the underprivileged kids. The article says nationally, disadvantaged students continue to be less likely to offer computer science. And although 78% of U.S. high school students attend a school that offers computer science, Black, African American students, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx students, and Native American Alaskan students are less likely to attend a school that offers it. So this is sort of the problem right now is they're trying to figure out how to educate teachers, and code.org is one of the biggest advocates of trying to figure out and offer curriculum and courses so that teachers and the students actually to have resources. And so this is a national effort and initiative that's going forth. And so I think that number is going to increase. Obviously, we want to be a part of that and help to provide content for all schools. But I think that's really important. And we kind of identified this, as we plan what we'd like to do in the future. We've talked a lot about, what is the problem and what is the solution and how can we help?
I mean, I think the point too is that a lot of the organizations that are trying to work on this, I mean, some like Apple, they've got apps that are trying to teach to elementary students. But I feel like the high school students and the middle school students are the ones who kind of get left out, and it just kind of like it's on pause until college. So that's where we're coming in, because really, I mean, we can teach this we already know we can teach this to middle school and high school students, and they can learn Xcode. And I think there are a lot of, Apple included, they're thinking, oh, we got to wait till college to teach them Xcode. You don't have to wait till college. We've seen that. I mean, middle school is a perfect time to introduce that. And I think there are high schools that they don't have the resources to do it. So this is where we want to help. We want to help the middle school students as well, because they can learn it, and some of our, top students have come in at 13, 14 years old and, have amazed us. So it's definitely a time to teach Xcode and teach true app development, and you don't have to, dumb it down for them. So, which I think that happens a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there were a couple of students that challenged us, back in, I guess it was 2012, 2013, before Swift came out. And they said, you could actually teach this in a week. And I'm thinking, you can't do that. You like, computer science is typically taught in an entire year. And there are obviously multiple levels of computer science that can be taught, but basics are typically taught in 1 year. I had compressed it down to about 4 weeks, but I was challenged by a student, and their thought was, really, you don't need to learn everything. You can just learn the core fundamentals in less than 2 days. And so I think that's what drove us when we built the App Camp, to try to keep all the basics down to just a day and a half. And it's amazing that we were able to do that. But I think you're right, that once you explain a concept, don't take the typical approach, which is, I've just learned 2 + 2 is 4. Now I got to go home and do 500 problems to prove that I understand that concept. So rather, we take sort of the Khan Academy approach, which is you learn the concept. When you've proved your mastery, you move on. And so if you use the right concrete examples, kids get it. Like, they get it. Like, you teach them what a variable is, let them write 1 line of code or 2 lines of code, and then they got it. Move on. So I think that's, basically how we have found that secret sauce of how to teach computer science really quickly. The kids are getting it. I think you got to have the right instructor, but the kids that are really interested in learning, to challenge themselves and learn, it's not just computer science. It's just basically you have to be willing to be challenged, open your mind. And we found these kids get it pretty quick, especially growing up with technology these days.
Yeah. And please don't teach it with pen and paper. I mean, that just doesn't work. I mean, that is not teaching them what they need to learn as far as app development goes and as far as computer science goes. I mean, no one is putting this down on pen and paper.
Right.
That's why we have compilers. That's why we have, operating.
Yeah, not in the real world.
No. We've actually partnered with some school systems in our area locally to allow some scholarship students to attend our camp. And I think we want to do more of that in the future. I think there are more organizations out there who want to work with us, and hopefully we can scale this so that it's not just Asheville, North Carolina, and Buncombe County, but it goes beyond that to to the entire world. So yeah, we're thinking big, but we got to start small.
Exactly. So are you ready to switch gears to a little bit of iOS and Mac development?
Yeah.
Okay. So for people that are not iOS developers, there's been for many years UIKit. So essentially what Apple built for app developers using their application IDE or the program that you use to build apps is called Xcode. And UIKit was basically a way for you to take visual elements, drag them on screen. So that basically means grabbing buttons, labels, image box, sliders, whatever, the visual portion that users see. You grab that stuff, you put it on the screen onto a storyboard. Before storyboards, there was also individual files called nibs. We'll talk about that in another episode. But UIKit was basically like when we first started, it was amazing because I come from a programming background where everything is code. And at the time, I think that there was not enough visual feedback for you to be able to build something. I guess the best way to say it is it wasn't as efficient. There was less room for the artist or for the designer, the UI designer, to be involved. And so a lot of times the artist would, or the UI designer would mock up an interface and go head to head against the developer.
Yeah. And they were separate apps, remember, when we first started.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I almost forgot. But yeah, that was a separate portion, and you didn't have any collaboration. I mean, I think the collaboration was more difficult. Yeah. And as time went on, Apple worked to build Interface Builder, which was what it was called. They built it into Xcode, and that allowed for, more collaboration, I think. And so visually, you could lay something down on the page, and then the developer could come in and just, I call it pick whip because I'm thinking of After Effects, but you could drag the visual element over to the code and it would generate the code for you, which was pretty cool. But that worked well until they went beyond the iPhone, 4-inch iPhone and the 9.7-inch iPad, and started making all of the different variations of sizes. And now you've got to come up with a way that things look consistent, but you don't want to take a small app and just blow it up to an iPad. And
if you want to look really nice on the iPad, then it becomes a really bloated app, and you've got this problem that Apple actually had with GarageBand. I think it was like maybe 2 gigs or something at the time to download that entire app.
Yeah, and so they had some really nifty ways to solve this in the beginning. I remember, we've been through so many, we've been involved in iOS development since 2010. So we watched, the language change from Objective-C to Swift. We've gone all in on Swift, but we also watched the visual portion of it change. And when they ended up having, iPhones that became larger, like 4.7, 5.1, 6, 6.5 inch. And then the iPads got smaller and larger. The 12.9 iPad. It was a nightmare to create multiple interfaces. And so they created constraints to solve this problem.
Yes. We never taught constraints for a reason. You can't teach it. It's like some kind of magic, magical, I want to say voodoo or something that.
It always reminds me, like in English, when you have MLA, but take that and multiply it times 100. Like there's all these rules, and you just need to understand how to write constraints for your case. And that's really difficult to teach kids when you're in a camp and you're trying to talk about, okay, so, here's an iPhone app that we're building. Now we're going to switch it to the iPad and build for that. And you remember the kids' response when we'd build for an iPhone, and then on the iPad, they run it and they're like, awful. Wait, where's the button at?
My button's way over here. And we'd say, well, it's trial and error. We're not going to fix that right now. We're just going to concentrate on the iPhone. But, I could tell that wasn't a really, really good answer. And then thank goodness SwiftUI came in and just about that time. And
we could have spent an entire week just teaching constraints. And we just had to build. If we were building a specific app that we wanted to use on the iPhone interface, we just built that. And if we wanted to build something for the iPad, we built that. We didn't worry about switching platforms during the camp. But SwiftUI has been a breath of fresh air. I mean, and SwiftUI didn't invent declarative design, but the I didn't realize when we were developing code and apps all this time that there was imperative design and declarative design, because I'm not in the web design world, and I've stuck primarily with iOS development in the last 10 years or so. And so before that, it reminds me of kind of how how TVs were always TVs until 720 came out and you found out that the old TVs were 480p. It's like, oh, I didn't know it. I thought it was just a TV. Yeah. So the same thing happened where as more modern languages came on the scene, they started talking about declarative design. And I just kind of ignored it because, I'd gone away from Java and all the other languages that I learned before. And so moving into web languages, I learned a few, but didn't really master any. But declarative design became a new thing, especially when it comes to like Flutter and React Native. And that was a big focus for them, that, hey, we need to be able to design an interface and it should understand, what it needs to do to in order to lay itself out on screen. And I think you found a great example of explanation between imperative being the old design, declarative the new. Like, was it basically imperative was like going to a restaurant and ordering fries and a drink and a burger with specifics, and you pay a certain amount of money, and then that's how you describe imperative, whereas declarative is basically, what was the example used? I can't remember, but it was like declarative is like you just go up and say, hey, I need some food that will fill me up, and they just provide it for you.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah,
pretty close to that. But SwiftUI has taken cues from more of the modern languages, and now that I've kind of dove into those other languages, I realized if Apple hadn't made this change, I think in a few years they would have lost a lot of developers who were angry about this whole debacle of, like, I can't remember how many thousands of different iterations of screen real estate or devices you have to support, or orientations. And you remember when we built our education app back in the day, where the last thing we did was spend, what was it, an entire month on just the landscape and portrait and the sizes. I mean, I don't know how
there were a lot of issues. Yeah, there were a lot of issues.
It's like write code and then, does it work? Yes. Turn it sideways. Oh, it doesn't work. Fix it.
Yeah.
Try it on this device.
And then when we updated it to Swift, it was the same thing. We kind of had to go back and do the same thing again. So, because it was initially an Objective-C app.
Right.
Very, very bloated app. I think it was, what was it?
It was like
maybe about a gig.
It was like 500 or 600 megabytes, which was huge. It was really, you couldn't even download it on cellular.
Yeah. Somebody we worked with said it needs to go on a diet. So
yeah.
And then Apple came out with what do they call it? App thinning.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was because of us. I think they were inspired by our app, and they were like, we need to tell people how to thin their apps. These are too big.
Yeah, it's like you need to be able to put your app on the App Store and basically allocate which resources are for the iPad and which resources are for the iPhone, and then the platform will only download the resources relevant to the device that you have. So I thought that was amazing. I was like, yeah, it's just for us, Bob.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, SwiftUI changed everything, because now you can basically say, I need a text, and I'm going to have many copies of that text and in an array or a list. And, it's like, oh, previously to that, you had to be very specific with UIKit. And now you can just focus on creativity rather than having to learn every single, like, okay, I'm going to stick with Stack Overflow and try to copy this code over, because I don't have time to read the documentation, which I should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing with SwiftUI that I really love is that the fact that you've got the canvas right there. So, you're typing out your code, and then you have a visual canvas that's right there. As long as you got your preview at the bottom, you've got that set up, and you can actually see it in the canvas.
And a little bit of context to how you could do this before. you could actually have visual feedback before, but it was really difficult to set up for beginners because you had to learn about IB interactables, I think, and IB inspectables, where you could put things in Xcode that aren't in the attributes panel. And I did a lot of that stuff, but I didn't learn that when I first started coding. No. That was much, much later. And so, and it was CPU intensive. Like my fan was like an aircraft carrier taking off. As soon as I put that in my code, every single screen was trying to draw itself. And now with SwiftUI, like you said, you just put that little preview code at the bottom of your Canvas or your code there, which by default that just jumps in there when you create a new file. But a beginner could just hop in and start typing a few lines of code, and boom, there's the interface right there.
It works a lot like playgrounds. I mean, it's like that's how we started teaching, and I think that's what inspired us to teach the first app camp we taught. Actually, I think it was Daniel Steinberg. I was at the Alt conference that year, and Daniel Steinberg kind of showed off like how you would teach it in a classroom setting, and he was using playgrounds. And I think it was 2014, or maybe it was 2015. Well, I think it would have been 2015 because this was the year after it was released. But he had a talk on it, and I told him, I said, we're actually teaching a camp, this summer, and this was great because it's really helped us kind of get think about how we could introduce it. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. It was interesting. I remember we were at what was the restaurant down the street from the conference center, and we saw Daniel there, and got a chance to have a meal with him.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing about WWDC and in-person conferences is you start seeing all these people and meeting them in person, people that you maybe seen online or seen on Twitter or talked to on Twitter. And then all of a sudden you can connect with them and have a lunch or have a coffee with them. So it's pretty cool. But, on top of seeing Apple developers that you get to know, Apple engineers that you get to know year after year, and, go out and see, have a burrito with them.
Yeah. The networking was amazing. I really missed that. I love the virtual conferences they're doing now. Yeah. Everything is high quality that Apple's doing, but I really do miss the in-person. Hopefully that's coming back at some point. Stadiums are filling up, so I don't know.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe they'll have an outdoor WWDC, it'd be like,
oh, that's interesting.
That'd be kind of interesting, but maybe they'll have it outdoor with a big screen or something. And I don't know.
No rain.
Hey, it's California. It never rains in California, right? So.
That'll be the 1 year it rains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's hilarious. We didn't talk about this, previously, but some of the hilarious memories. The funniest one was the coffee story.
Oh yeah.
Where I met speaking of networking, and I met these new people. Was so excited. I was at a Starbucks, met this guy. We strung up a conversation, and we talked for 15, 20 minutes, like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Ironically, we leave.
I was standing in line talking.
Yeah, ironically, I leave. You were already standing in line for maybe an hour. And then I get to you, and the guy that he came with was standing right beside you, and you were talking to him. I was like, oh, this is meant to be. We were supposed to meet each other. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had that coffee in one hand, and then I had the laptop bag in the other hand, and it slipped off my hand and yanked the coffee and spilled it all over him.
All over his shirt.
All over his shirt, all over my shirt. Oh, man. That was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, that ended that conversation. Yep.
Oh, precious memories.
Maybe Apple in the news.
Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about what Apple has done in this last year. I mean, I think they have returned to form, and a lot of people are talking about this, and it's interesting. I think about my first MacBook Pro. I had a Dell computer, and I was looking online at buying a MacBook Pro, but I was like, wow, the Apple computers are so expensive, and I felt like they were worth it for creative work. But, $2,000 for a MacBook Pro, it just wasn't in the budget, at least in my mind. And this unfortunate event happened where my wife tripped over something and threw water or whatever drink she had over my Dell laptop. And that was the only laptop I had. And so she knew how much I wanted a Mac. She felt bad. And she looked at me and she said, how much is that Mac computer you're looking at? and a big smile on my face because I was like, "Are you really asking me about a brand new MacBook Pro's cost? Are you considering this?" And yeah, she said, "Yeah, I know you work hard, and you really have been looking at buying a used one. And since I spilled water on yours, I think it would be I think she said something of that nature, like, yeah, you can buy it. It's for business. You want to use this for creative work or whatever. So go for it." I didn't hesitate on ordering that machine in 2007. And I remember getting it. And I was even looking at the video this morning when you open it up. Remember they used to have those intro videos?
Oh yeah,
Like,
I forgot about that. That was like
the music came on.
They had that back in 99, I guess, when the first iMac came out.
Yeah, it was just a hype moment for a person opening a Mac for the first time.
That was all Steve Jobs, because he
bring it back,
did
Apple.
that. Yeah, that was awesome. I remember that. Well, that was back when you never saw a video. I mean, you wouldn't see a video on your computer. No. It was like, wow, this is a video playing on my computer.
Right. It was amazing when you opened it up. You got introduced that way, and it's like, we're kind of missing that touch. Now what happens is you turn it on, you forget you got it on, and that voiceover scares you to death.
I know. Yeah.
But anyway, I moved on from that to a 2010, and that was the 2009 model, had NVIDIA graphics. Moved to the 2013. I remember you and I went and purchased those.
Yep.
I think they were the glorious ones, the ones that had the ports.
Yeah, that's still a good machine. I mean, it really is.
Oh yeah, like it's revered as one of the best machines they ever created because it was powerful at the time. It had integrated graphics and the offset GPU, the AMD.
Yeah,
and that was really cool.
And my son's using it today. He's doing a bunch of music stuff on it, but it still works well. He's still using it. Yeah, I mean, it's still working great.
8 years old.
Yeah,
doesn't run the latest OS, I don't think, but it works.
Yeah,
but it had all the ports. And I think that was the thing, that pro users need access to various devices, and dongle gate was introduced in 2016. I got that MacBook Pro and I felt like I'm on top of the world because I've got this touch bar. It's like next generation technology, except a lot of people miss those function keys, and like the escape key was the big one for developers, like no escape key. And I thought that's not a big deal, except when my touch bar locked up, all of a sudden,
that is.
I couldn't, hit Command Option Escape to do force quit. So now I had to just kill the computer. And obviously they were like forcing it. They're making them thinner and thinner. They had thermal issues. I mean, there was so many things that people were complaining about with those machines. In the new era of Apple, you kind of feel like they're stubborn and they're thinking ahead to the future. And so they're not going to change. USB-C is here to stay. They're going to have USB-C, all on both sides of the machine. But then they released a smaller one, which only had 2 USB-C ports, and people weren't quite ready to move on yet. Things were slowly transitioning in the PC and Mac world where that was becoming a standard, but it was dongle after dongle. And a lot of creatives were using SD cards for video, and they had to find a dongle for that. And you were finding these adapters that didn't work. Some of them were too slow. I mean, it was just like, and then it's like, okay, so I also have to have one for my monitor. MagSafe went away. So, I mean, there was a lot. They were trying to push forward.
I knew that was a mistake. I said that was a mistake when they did that, and they brought it back.
Yeah, I mean, this year, I felt in 2019, they made a couple good steps. And I have that machine right now, 2019 MacBook Pro, i9, 32 gigs, whatever. And I have this machine, but the one thing that I've having trouble with is if I open a browser, the volume of the fans ramping up because of the thermal restrictions with the size of the machine. It's just constantly trying to keep it cool. And the pros were like, come on, Apple, just make it thicker. We don't care. The machine can be bigger. We just want our ports back. And I'm thinking they're not going to do that. Apple's stubborn. They're going to keep making machines, pushing us further into the future, more into wireless. And lo and behold, a few weeks ago, or well, I should say 2020, they talked about the transition away from Intel, obviously, to their own architecture using the M1. Another conversation for another day. But I am amazed. You got the M1. I started testing it on my job to provide to our users. And I'm just amazed that I spent $3,500 on this MacBook Pro in 2019, and even the MacBook Air M1 feels just as snappy with no fan as my $3,500 machine, and the MacBook Air is like $1,000. I mean, it's amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, I've yet to hear the fan. It's been, a year that I've had this machine just about, and I've yet to hear the fan. It's so crazy. And I use Final Cut. I use, I push it to its limit. And
you got the MacBook Pro 13-inch,
MacBook
right?
Pro 13-inch. Yeah, M1, the original. Yeah.
That's a great solid machine. And like just the Air had me excited. Like if this is how a MacBook Air performs, like what is the MacBook Pro, like 16-inch, in the larger size iMac and Mac Pro going to be like? And so awesome. We got our first taste where a few weeks ago, they launched the M1 Pro base chip and the M1 Max base chip, and having 10 core, which is just a couple cores more than what you've got. And then the GPUs are really the thing that people are most interested in, especially creatives for videography, photography, YouTubers, musicians, movie producers. Like they want to know, well, how do you compare to basically NVIDIA's RTX line of video cards? That's like the standard. And you just go on YouTube and type in M1 Max versus or M1 Pro versus. You'll go down a rabbit hole of back-to-back rave reviews about this machine. And I've fallen for it. So I ordered the M1 Max.
I've noticed a pattern here. It's like
10 core, 32 GPU. Yeah.
but see, Charles, there's a pattern here. As soon as I upgrade my machine, then you feel like you have to upgrade.
I feel it's the opposite. I feel like whatever I upgrade mine, then...
and vice versa. I was about to say. Now I'm kind of like, oh, when do I get to upgrade again?
Yeah, we encourage each other to upgrade.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to test it out. I mean, I'm watching lots of videos, and I've not been able to shake the fact that I want to replace my machine with the M1 based architecture. And it seems like why do you need to replace it with another machine? We have a very capable one. But I think that the fan thermal issues, I really am excited that they brought back HDMI. They brought back the SD card slot. They kept the 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports and added MagSafe back. It's just...
Yeah, that was a great move. Great move, Apple.
I've only heard one complaint about that laptop. You know what that is? There's only one complaint that anyone will bring up about this laptop. Everything else, the performance is amazing. The ports are amazing. There's just one eyesore.
That notch, yeah.
The notch, the iconic notch.
Hey, but it's a Mac when you see it.
Exactly. Like
it's subtle branding, to some extent.
Yeah, it's first conversation. They know what they're doing. It's marketing. I mean, I don't think they did it just for marketing, but I feel that they wanted to do Face ID, and they will figure out a way to get that thin enough to put it in, but they wanted to condition us to be ready for it.
Yep.
And they knew it was going to be some marketing opportunity too. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think the last thing about the machine that's great is the screen. So the Pro Display XDR is $6,000. And the fact that Mini LED came to the iPad Pro, I guess the M1 iPad Pro this year, you got in an iPad basically a $6,000 technology in an iPad. So we kind of figured it was coming to the MacBook Pro, and obviously they stuffed that same technology into the laptop. And so you've got 1,600 nits of brightness, which is unheard of in a laptop, and it's 120 hertz. I mean, it's unheard of because the competition in the PC world is reference monitors, which are anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000. And so people that have the money, they pay $6,000 for the Pro Display XDR. I don't have that kind of money for a screen. And then kick an extra $1,000 in.
I was going to say the stand. Yeah, you got to get the stand too.
Well, I don't know. Is it $5,000 and then $1,000 for the screen or for the stand? I can't remember.
Maybe. Yeah.
Something like that.
Basically, $1,000 for the stand.
Yeah. I know. So, you might as well say it's $6,000 for the entire package. But to have a laptop and thing in that much power, I think it's the Pro name is deserved. for the price. And I think that looking at the specs where it's matching up against a Mac Pro, it's worth the money. So
Yep.
I drank the Kool-Aid. Hopefully it arrives in the next week.
I'm not getting the headphones, even though I love them. The over-the-ear headphones.
I think they're amazing, but
they need to drop the price. But they are really nice. I made the mistake of putting them on the other day in the store, and I went, "Oh, why did I do that? Now I want them."
Yeah, I understand.
But they're just too much.
Well, you want to talk about something cool? Just spend a second on that.
Yeah, I read a thread the other day about the first flying car passing safety test in Japan. And I was like, wow, we are living in the future, you know? I mean, it's just so cool to see something like that.
Well, it's hilarious. In the 90s, I thought that was going to be, something we saw in the early 2000s, but
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we all remember Back to the Future and whatever when they take off flying, and we're like, oh, that's never going to happen anytime soon. But here we are.
I want the hoverboard.
Yeah, I know. I feel like there are prototypes out there with that, but it's not. It's not a thing yet. Yeah. Yeah. So who knows? But that just seemed pretty cool. I just want to make sure they have a 5-speed or a 6-speed and a clutch or something, in some of those flying cars. Because I was in my son's 5-speed the other day, and I was like, man, I miss this. I really missed the 5-speed.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. There's just something different about driving with a stick shift versus automatic, which I have now. So one of these days, I'm gonna go back and get a stick shift, even if it's not electric. And I don't have an electric car. I just have a hybrid. So,
well, I think that's all the time we have for today's podcast. Thanks for listening to the Swift App School podcast.
Yeah,
Bob, you want to tell them if they're interested how to find out more about us?
If you want to just go to our website, it's swiftappschool.com. and you can find out more about us. We're going to be posting some tutorials in the near future, some free, some paid, but we're going to start out with just the basics that will all be free content. And a lot of that will be taught by Charles. The tutorials, I'll start to post some of those probably March? That's kind of what we're thinking right now.
Yeah, I think we're March, and we're looking to bring some of our experienced technical assistants on board and have them generate content as well. So we're really excited about that and give them an opportunity to continue to grow and learn and experience game development and get paid for it.
If you want to reach us on social media, we're on Instagram at Swift App School, also on Twitter at Swift App School. You can email us, Bob at swiftappschool.com, Charles at swiftappschool.com. So hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll hopefully have some more in the near future.